Coming up in the Bahamas tonight, Bahamians marching for justice. And one local union speaks out on pending layoffs in the financial services sector. The Bahamas tonight, the weekend edition starts now.
Now in HD. ZNS Network presents The Bahamas Tonight. This portion of the news brought to you by BTC Every Day.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Kendino Knowles, and welcome to the weekend edition of The Bahamas Tonight. Well, a show of solidarity against crime and its impact on our community today as dozens took to the streets of New Providence to take part in a pro-hanging march led by activist Rodney Monker. With the murder count reaching unprecedented levels, protesters say they are hoping for the reinstatement of capital punishment. Our Dawn Davis followed that march today.
We're appealing to the public to join us in making an appeal to the government to go back to the tables and make some decisions that are going to protect us, the Bahamian people, against crime, against murder.
Dr. Margot Seymour is one of hundreds who marched for justice on Saturday morning, hoping to persuade the government to ensure that capital punishment is reinforced in the Bahamas. Civil rights activist and Justice of the Peace Rodney Monker continues to speak out against the increasing crime figures, and he puts forth several suggestions to the government.
No bail for person charged with murder. Move the impediment that prevents the state from hanging murderers. And all they have to do is hold a little referendum, get rid of the Privy Council, and affirm constitutionally, they're the lawyers, that capital punishment by rope, by hanging, is the lawful mean for persons charged with murder.
President of FOAM, Candy Gibson, says the escalating murder count is adversely affecting the families and children of murdered victims. Meantime, DNA leader Branville McCartney, whose brother was murdered last year, says safety is a concern for him in this country.
Because murder right now affecting everybody. If you don't personally had a loved one murdered, you know of someone who had a loved one murdered, and it's painful to know that that person that would have killed your loved one gets bail, go, then kill somebody else, family member.
The fear of crime is mammoth. It's out of control in this country. We need to put the fear of the law in the hearts and minds of the criminal element. And we need the political will to ensure that happens.
Surgeon Dr. Dwayne Sands says his pro-hanging march has everything to do with stopping the violence in the country and not with politics.
The truth of the degree of violence in this country needs to be known by the Bahamian public. And so when you see the suffering, when you see the brutality, when you see the stabbings, the shootings, the beatings, the rapes, it is unacceptably high. We can no longer afford to sacrifice the rights of society for the supposed rights of the individual.
Organizers are planning a series of pro-hanging marches throughout the year.
Well, capital punishment has not been carried out in the Bahamas for over 2 decades now, but government has pledged its commitment to combat crime and the fear of crime. Officials have engaged in extensive discussions to promote a comprehensive plan of action to embrace policing, community, and social development in their quest to tackle crime. Government has also noted its commitment to provide the necessary resources, both human and capital, to support its plan of action. These include resources for the early completion of additional criminal courts to ensure that criminal trials take place within a reasonable time, as well as the reduction of the number of persons released on bail. Now, government continues to urge all Bahamians to become involved in promoting safety and security. Well, the police, through its heightened police presence, is cracking down on motorists that don't obey the rules of the road. A number of drivers were cited, in fact, last evening by officers of the Northeastern Division in its evening operation. A total of 207 drivers were cited for various traffic violations, and one adult male was arrested for disorderly behavior. Well, now to news from the labor front. Globally, we've seen not just governments, but companies clamping down on costs, trying to save every penny they can. And locally, we've seen the same thing happening across industries. more recently the financial services sector. It's a situation that's no doubtedly been birthed by the weak economy. And now with pending layoffs at a number of local commercial banks, the trade union representing workers in the finance industry is issuing a call to action.
You know, in the financial sector, we have a slogan: it's better to need a union than to need one and don't have one, and to have one and you don't need it.
It's the advice president of the Bahamas Financial Services Union, Teresa Mortimer, is giving to members of the financial services industry unrepresented by the union. In fact, Mrs. Mortimer told ZNS News that her union only represents about 20% of the people working in finance across the country, leaving them at risk of losing not only their jobs without cause, but also being sent home with the bare minimum.
My phone has been ringing non-stop, and it's ringing with the employees from Bank of Nova Scotia and from Royal Bank especially, and their cry is, "Can you help us?" And it's so sad, I cannot help you if you are not a member of the union.
Scotiabank Bahamas recently announced plans to centralize some of its back office functions into its Trinidad and Tobago hub and is offering affected employees the option of applying for voluntary separation packages. The bank has not disclosed how many jobs might be impacted, but the move follows similar exercises undertaken by Royal Bank of Canada and CIBC First Caribbean International Bank.
As their counterparts throughout the Caribbean are a part of unions, and there is a partnership agreement in place in those countries where the bank must sit to the table and negotiate with the unions.
Jennifer Isaacs Dotson is the first vice president of the Caribbean Congress of Labour, and she's appealing to Scotia and Royal Bank workers to act fast and to get on board the BFSU's train.
We as a country must stand up for ourselves. Our sisters and brothers in the Caribbean do not hesitate to join a union. So I'm imploring to Bahamians, stand up, exercise that fundamental right to associate with a union of your choice.
Yes, redundancies are going on all around us. That's no secret, okay? But here in First Caribbean International Bank, CIBC, we sit at the table. And because we sit at the table, we have a part in how it happens. We have a part in the process that it takes. And even though it's going to be mass redundancies, what you see going on in CIBC First Caribbean has persons who have completed 30 years of service, some even who have completed less years of service, but who have said, listen, I can retire now. I'm eligible and I'm ready to go home. They're not only getting their retirement, early retirement, they're getting a separation package. So they're getting a plus to going home. These persons in Scotia and Royal, they're going to be getting only what's under the law. The reason being, they're not in the union. And I can't say to them, quick enough or more enough, you need to join the union.
Well, a special event at the historic Bethel Baptist Church last evening commemorating Black History Month, which is now being observed in the United States, and to mark the visit of Dr. Bernice King, who is the daughter of U.S. Civil Rights leader Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. King, who serves as Chief Executive Officer of the King Center, is a special guest at several weekend events sponsored by the Bahamas Historic Foundation. At last night's service, Prime Minister Perry Christie noted that Black History Month is important as it's used to ensure that young people understand the importance of taking up the baton to ensure the legacy and message of peace and social justice promoted by Civil Rights leader Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is not forgotten.
This is as true for Atlanta as it is for Nassau. We are, all of us, called to play our part in helping to make his dream a reality for all the peoples of the world. To be sure, the legacy of Dr. King is deeply centered in the American experience. But we here in the Bahamas lay claim to a small but cherished part of that legacy as well. For it was in the mangroves of Bimini, in the extreme northern Bahamas, not far off the coast of Florida, that Dr. King was inspired to write a part of his now immortal Nobel Peace Prize acceptance speech.
Now, the Prime Minister said Dr. King was also aware that in the early to mid-1960s, a non-violent struggle was also going on in the Bahamas to rid the country of racial injustices and inequality. He noted that Bahamian history also shows formerly repressed people speaking up for justice, and men and women who had dreams of better days for their own children stood up against oppression like that which occurred in the United States.